All right, well, let's talk about Chapter 1. I hope everybody had a good first week. Was able to spend some time on the discussion boards and get to know each other. Very interesting backgrounds that we all come from. Very diverse as well. So I think it's a good time for everybody to kind of network and get to know each other. But let's talk about Chapter 1. Let me tell you why Chapter 1 is important to us. Probably the most important thing about Chapter 1 is all the definitions and making sure that you understand these definitions, because as we get into them, as we get into the book, you're going to see these words repeated over and over and over again. And so you need to know exactly what these definitions are and what they mean. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the definitions that I feel are important. But realistically, any definition you see in Chapter 1 is very important because you're going to be seeing it over and over again. One thing that we see, you'll see a lot of in your law enforcement career. Every criminal justice class that I teach, we talk about this, and it is the UCR report, the Uniform Crime Report. Now, the UCR is put out through the FBI. It's put out every year annually, and it basically just talks about statistics for that jurisdiction's crime. It will go into the number of rapes, the number of murders, the number of robberies per capita for that area. And then a lot of news sources or internet sources then use the UCR to make a list of your 10 most dangerous cities. When I worked for the Mansfield City Police Department, the year I was there, they were listed as the 10th most dangerous city in the nation. And that was based off of the UCR report and then per capita ratings. Because like the city of Mansfield, there's no way that the city of Mansfield had more murders than other cities throughout the United States. They were too small, but it was based off per capita, per the number of people that lived there, and the ratio of murders for that. So that's what the UCR is used for. Primarily, you can also use it when you, as a police chief or as administrator, when you get into grants. Anytime you apply for a federal grant, they almost, in the law enforcement world, they will almost always require that you supply uniform crime information data to the FBI annually. But additionally, you can use the statistics in there to justify your grant. If I'm trying to get a grant for Ohio the Department of Victim Services grant for violence against women, then what I'm going to do is quote my UCR data and show an increase in violence against women or things like that. Let me tell you some problems with the UCR, and the primary problem is it is self-reporting. There is nothing that requires us to report to the UCR, and there's nothing that really checks our facts to see if we're really telling the truth. What you'll see is, especially when a new police chief comes in, they'll kind of sort of change maybe the definition of a crime to get their data stats lowered, so they can say, hey, look at what I did. I came in here and all my data statistics have been lowered. Or if a police chief is trying to get an increase in funding, he might come in and raise the numbers and say, oh, look, we have a high increase in this specific type of crime, so I need more money and more police officers, and maybe use it as a scare tactic. So there's no way for us for the FBI to know if the crimes that we are reporting are accurate. And now we'll say that there's a lot of software out there. UCR is very, very time consuming for a police department that want to submit information to them. So what a lot of police departments do is they just buy software that will automatically do the reporting. That's what my agency has. And so it makes it more difficult to submit false information. When a police officer files a report, he's not thinking about UCR information. He doesn't care. So they just file their report, and then they hit the submit button, and our software scans that report to see if it's a UCR reportable offense or in our case we call it a NIBRS reportable offense, because that's Ohio's version, and that information is then reported to the UCR. So they see it as a NIBRS reportable offense, and if it is, it checks for all the data that it needs, and then it will go through this little validation process. And if the officer hasn't submitted all the data that the UCR needs, then we'll kick it back to them and say, hey, you can't submit the report until we get all this data. So that's helping us in the law enforcement field, is these new softwares and things, and helping us be more accurate. But it is a flawed system. They also talk about the National Crime Victimization Survey. Once again, that's one of those ones that's self-reported. You know, I'll give you a good example. What they're really doing there is interviewing victims, and a good example is how many men are going to admit to spousal abuse as a male. So a lot of the numbers are underreported. So you just got to take them for what they are. They're good national reports, but they're not completely accurate. So then the book gets into the three components of the criminal justice system, which is the law enforcement system, the police, the courts, and then corrections. And basically the book says those are the three components of the criminal justice process. Because, you know, your courts kind of encompass your prosecution and all that. And then corrections kind of encompasses probation and parole and the actual corrections officers and those kinds of things. So just kind of keep in mind that those are your three basic components of your criminal justice system. Now, when we talk about corrections, man, those guys have got truly a burden on their shoulders. Corrections is not a steady field to be in. First off, you're dealing with all kinds of things like privatization of prisons. Laws always changing, but more so what you really are dealing with is a change in philosophy, a continual change in philosophy, from a liberal to a conservative mindset. I'm not really talking political, are you a liberal or are you conservative? What I'm talking about is a belief system and how to treat offenders. We've seen a shift in the 80s, and then we're shifting back and forth since then, but what we really saw was we went from a very punitive, the conservative movement says, very punitive form of corrections. Listen, if you break the law, excuse me, if you break the law, we're going to lock you up for this amount of time. And while you're locked up, you're going to be doing chain gangs. You know, you're going to get a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for lunch, whatever it might be. This is we need to feel like you are being punished for what you did. Well, the more of a liberal view of that is, listen, you made a mistake, and now we're going to try to make it so that you don't hurt the community again. And so we're going to give you these programs and teach you how to do all these different things. And so it gets a little, you know, what do? You know, the community needs to feel vengeance almost for the crime. Yet at the same token, if we do nothing for these people once we lock them up, then when they get back out, they're just going to reoffend. So it becomes very difficult sometimes for the correctional field. You have corrections officers who are expected to guard these inmates and be punitive, but at the same token, these corrections officers understand one day these inmates are going to be living in their communities, and what are they going to do? You know, to make sure that they don't reoffend or try to help that process along. So corrections officers have a true burden on their shoulders, and we're going to talk in Chapter 2 about some theories and things, and there's all kinds of theories out there, and it is truly, I call it the, you know, really the guinea pig of law enforcement, because we just keep trying all different kinds of ways to fix these people, and that are locked up and incarcerated, and we just keep throwing them. I say we keep throwing the spaghetti against the wall until something sticks. So, listen, that's it for the first part of Chapter 1. I'm going to end the video, and then we'll finish up. Hopefully we'll be able to finish up in one more section of YouTube video for chapter 1. So make sure you log back in and get section 2 of chapter 1.